Hello and welcome to our 5G Fireside Chat. My name is Andrea Rainey. I'm a Director of Market Development at AT&T. And here with me today are Puneet from HCL and Rajesh from AT&T. And we're going to talk about the importance of 5G and its impending boom in the next few years. Puneet, would you like to start off?
Sure. My name is Puneet Kumar. I head the HCL's Telecom Media and Entertainment business for North America. And I work with telcos as part of that industry segment for the past 25 years. Rajesh?
Yeah, hi, Rajesh Natarajan. I am an Assistant Vice President at AT&T, and I'm the CTO for the Go-to-Market Partners segment, supporting hyperscalers, ISVs, and system integrators. And I also manage the BPO segment from a sales perspective for AT&T.
5G, it's been quite the buzzword for the past 3 or 4 years. It's gained major momentum, though, in the enterprises only this year. It's gone from nice to have to must have. And what's driving that change?
So that's an excellent question here, Andrea, because frankly, there are two things. The first one is 5G has been a buzzword for many, many years now, as we all know. And that's with any new technology that people are excited about. Autonomous driving, so many other things that we can talk about, which create these initial buzz. But the reality is that until the past 12 months or so, network operators in general hadn't had a very large deployment of 5G assets on the ground. Spectrum had been acquired, and then it takes some time for networks to be deployed. And as the networks have been deployed over the past 12 months, they've been ubiquitous and then now available to enterprises to use, right? And as a result of that, enterprises now see 5G in their backyard and have come to the realization that, wow, this is something that they can actually leverage and use, something which they didn't have an ability to look at earlier. And then it's created all these new kinds of use cases that enterprises have come to realize, including automation, security, and more bandwidth use. So would you agree with that, Puneet?
I agree with you, Rajesh. I mean, coronavirus pandemic led to delay in deploying your assets for 5G. At the same time, what happened really was, because of that pandemic, people had to uproot themselves from their offices and start to work from home. And working from home needs them to have enterprise level security for their collaboration with their teams. That led to an initial uptake of 5G within the environment. What happened then is that people have got back to workspaces in a hybrid model. It's a new normal. Right?
Oh, in the enterprise space.
Enterprise space.
Yes.
It's normal, and which is where now it's a ongoing collaboration on secure platforms to work such as this way. And I think that will be an area for 5G to start to show its chops about what they can do.
Yeah, I certainly think so. I think especially with the new normal and enterprises, this is the time for 5G to shine in the enterprise space.
I agree. And I'm just thinking the other way to look at this from enterprise standpoint is every digital enterprise is looking at ways and means of differentiating itself with their workforce, with the customers, on their products, on their business models. And what they are doing is they're spending time, effort, and money on looking at their systems, their architecture, in structure, the business applications.
Sure.
All in a way for them to differentiate their marketplace and give their customers an experience. So one trend that I think will be quite relevant is the experience transformation part of the activity, which is where understanding the industry segment and enabling 5G technologies to deliver business models and business experiences. I think that will drive a lot of the required investments of 5G to get adopted in the marketplace.
Absolutely. I mean, the depth and scope of the industry experience that you talk about has just exploded with 5G right now. So I think that's an absolutely great point.
And look, what's happened. We're also already seeing what's happening in some segments, like for autonomous vehicle segment, a bit of fleet management area, which is seen IoT. Now it's an accelerated segment for us. Healthcare segments, and then visual media segments as well.
Sure.
So I think looking at 5G technologies, looking at the multi-device environment that brings in the ability to splice the network so you can give bandwidth to the right requisite function.
Sure.
Perfect example is if you look at the Uber business function, Uber apps, for maps to location to find the riders, all of them require different functions and different computations.
Sure.
Something that can be emulated by the business by using some of the 5G technology elements. I think one other thing that will drive some of those digital transformation initiatives for enterprises is that they can take decisions on real time and on a back office driven after the fact decision making process, right?
Sure.
So some of those changes from a digital transformation side from an enterprise will probably get married to 5G technologies specifics that might be useful for them, and hence will drive some of those investments. So which is why I feel that it's the time for 5G to start to move from good to have to must have for most enterprises.
It's amazing how multifaceted 5G can be. And since we're on this topic, how do you see 5G unlocking opportunities for the businesses?
Sure. I think one of the first things we need to do, Puneet, is actually explain what 5G is and isn't. Because I think there's a lot of perceptions as to 5G is and isn't, and there's a lot of, I would say, misperceptions in the community as well, right? So what 5G isn't is frankly just fast networking. I mean, that's really not what it's meant only to do. I mean, yes, it's fast, but what it is an ability to offer a higher bandwidth and a more secure fashion, and to cover more devices in a smaller footprint than it was earlier possible, right? And then the second part of it is actually an ability to prioritize traffic over the wireless network.
Right.
That was not always possible earlier, but that opens up a host of new applications that you couldn't do otherwise. It was only available in the wireline network, and now that's available in the wireless network. So that's a host of new services that are available. So there's a misperception that we're actually driving some use cases earlier, which have now, kind of the fog has gone away, and there are newer things that are going away. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is, high speed connectivity is one fundamental feature.
It's a given, yeah.
It's a given. And what you're saying is low latency on the platform allows, I was saying that I'm watching a sports live event.
Sure.
And I don't have a 5 seconds lag on what happened versus what's really watching.
Right.
I guess that's one thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just for entertainment standpoint.
Yeah, you're not looking at a movie 1930s style, right?
So you're right. And then you're saying that the devices on the ecosystem for 5G versus 4G, which is great, by the way,
Sure.
is 10x more.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
And that's just the beginning.
That's the beginning, right? I understand it's 1 million devices per half a square mile versus 100,000 devices on 4G.
Sure.
And then you also, I'm interpreting what you're saying is we're saying that you have network splicing abilities for you to be able to look at data sources coming and concurrently working with devices, which means that at any given point of time, every device is sending data. And I think that's what you're saying, the data is reaching to a source on cloud, which is also at the edge, and allows it to make decisions quicker for the business, correct?
Right. And actually, that's really where a key differentiator is, because in 5G, enterprises can now start splicing data to their requirements, right? Or splicing networks to their requirements. So think about creating like a small private network yourself in your wireless network, which is available right now, and then the security attached to it, and the policies you can attach to it, and the ability to access certain resources in the cloud, that only you can or your employees can, right? Versus everybody else. So therein lies the difference between a traditional wireless network and what 5G is now going to do.
Fantastic. I'm also thinking because of low latency factor, besides watching the sports game, it's also during the pandemic when doctors couldn't reach remote locations.
Sure.
Doing surgeries over remote locations with no jitters and no waits are very important for such life-saving functions, right?
Absolutely, because we've all seen the explosion of telemedicine. Now that's easy, right? It's video or tablet or what have you, that's possible. But when you do actual surgery, then the latency becomes a tremendously important. I mean, imagine the decision that a surgeon has to take, which are microseconds, right?
Right.
And that can only be through, he's sitting or she's sitting in a location hundreds of miles away, and the surgery is occurring in a hospital location, at a remote location perhaps, right? Those decisions are life-saving, right? So those decisions have to be done in microseconds, and something like a 5G network certainly enables that, right? So those are some of the key use cases that we will see going forward.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking, asset-heavy industries.
Sure.
I'm thinking distributed supply chain industries. I'm thinking healthcare we just talked about as well. Each of these get some part in all of the features of 5G technologies. In a manufacturing setup, a robotic-based implementation of a program and activity on assembly, hazardous environments, security. I'm thinking in the industry for distribution, looking at drones for precision deliveries.
Absolutely.
Are these some of these things that resonate with?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think what it does do is to take Industry 4.0 and take it away from just the factory floor into the wider, area, wider geography, right? Industry 4.0 need not be constrained to just the factory area. You can talk about automation in a factory floor, but once those pallets leave the factory, then you're tracking the pallets, where they arrive, how much temperature, what temperature they're at, and what stocking devices used to track them, etc., all the way to the destination, right? So now you've taken a smaller ecosystem, exploded it all into one single ecosystem, which is amazing.
It's fantastic. I mean, I'm just thinking a theme park as an example.
Sure.
And when there was coronavirus pandemic and raising, and at some point these people started to get better. We have medications in place, vaccines, but there was still the element of infection.
Mm-hmm.
And you open the theme park, because you can't keep them shut for too long.
Yep.
The ability for the theme parks to assess as people walk in with the temperature, face recognition on a real-time basis is what was the major change for them in terms of what is called edge computing.
Yep.
And taking decision right there, not a back office decision. You can't decide 2 weeks later as to who entered the park. It's too late. And I think what's happened afterwards was all of those technologies then became part of a show, an event at the theme park, where AR and VR became part of an experience.
Sure.
For fans or visitors who came to the park. So from a secure and protection standpoint, it was fabulous. But now it's become a revenue source for theme parks, which is amazing, right? It's new product line, new engagement models. So.
Right, and especially as you start the journey of bringing the cloud closer to the consumer, right? In this case, the enterprise. So while clouds have become, almost as important as oxygen now, but the closer you bring them to the enterprise, the more relevant use cases they have, even from a security perspective. And this is what 5G enables, edge computing, as well as, cloud computing in the environment. So
it'd be fabulous. I mean, just a thought that, if I was to do this ourselves as an enterprise versus working with a telecom major player like yourself, who's bringing the 5G, the IoT, and the cloud to the edge as a single platform.
Sure.
Available to enterprises to then build the applications on top.
Yep.
Is this something that you are all, ready to build or building it?
We're there. I mean, we've already made announcements in the market. We have, partnered with major hyperscalers and certainly other ISPs as well and platform providers. And this is something we certainly think is a great ecosystem player with somebody like you, right? Where we can combine all these forces together and offer that as a single package to the client.
Fantastic. I mean, I guess this is a perfect answer to this, the question on unlocking opportunities.
And so what do you think are the most critical elements for these 5G deployments?
So that's a great question, because really what's happening is we are moving away from, having to constrain ourselves to small site deployments to looking at really large open areas that weren't available to wireless technologies earlier, right? Other than you could put a cow or you can put a big antenna. Well, those no longer need to be the case. We can really look at use cases and clients uses which are much larger in geographic area as well as in potential of data amount consumed as we go past into this new area of 5G deployments. Specifically, as we look at this, right, we are looking at a significant explosion of ARVR, like Puneet mentioned, and then also an ability to, as we look at connected cars and microsurgery as well as other automated devices in a factory environment, an ability of the enterprise to actually make decisions much faster. It's a much faster area for them to work with. And then secondly, it's created this really amazing effect of pulling the cloud closer to the enterprise. Would you agree with that, Puneet?
Totally agree. And I'll take a step back, and I think one of the ways I see a large-scale deployment is industry specific and non-specific to industry.
Sure.
I think as we all can see, the non-specific to industry use cases around setting up an office, a LAN infrastructure, replacing it, or just providing mobility to enterprises. I think we've seen those use cases take form and shape. I wouldn't say they're large, but they're still much bigger than traditional IoT enterprise so far.
Sure.
The other one, I think, which is where we're seeing a lot more conversations, and I believe that's where the bigger deployments will happen, are around very specific to industry use cases. And you've given some examples of that.
Sure.
Those are, I feel, the still point solutions. Each of the industries that we talked about are all working towards their business model transformation. They just want to offer different services to their customer, different business models. And for them to do that, they need to be able to look at their own systems, the architecture, the infrastructure on which the applications sit, whether they have the ability to handle the scale of 5G.
Sure.
And that budgeting process will also need them to go through this process of testing use cases, right?
Sure.
But I believe that some of these use cases, and we can take some examples together, Rajesh, and talk about it, which by definition, if 5G applies to them and adds those technology availability factors and value, we'll see a big difference. Let's take an example of a port that you were thinking on. When we expand your thought process, then I want to add something to it.
So let's take an example of a port, right? So typically what happens in a port, which is a large open area with, let's talk about the number of connected devices that are possible, pallets and pallets of, stuff that needs to be shipped,
right?
Ships that need to be monitored, incoming ship to shore communication, as well as communication between the various vehicles inside a port area. So if you look at it, it's a really busy area with frankly very poor communication capabilities, right? People rely on walkie-talkies or other outdated modes of communication, which are limited by geography and frankly don't really extend past a certain and then how do you go from ship to shore? Well, we have some outdated radar technology also. So when you start and then move that toward a 5G deployment, all of a sudden you opened up the entire port area under a single, more importantly, secure network with an ability to handle almost any type of communication inside of that port, right? And that's a very real use case that people can latch on and say, okay, that makes sense to me. Now, can that be added on to other areas as well, right? Like for example, a mining area. Right? Or maybe a large automated factory, right? So those are, extensions of that, but a port is a very significant, use case that we can all view at and say, okay, that makes perfect sense from a 5G deployment.
Yeah, and I would think with that kind of data coming in, well, you can collect data from different sensors.
Sure.
And you're saying that the sensors will be enabled through 5G, be very low energy consumption, low latency. But also the fact that the data generated has to be analyzed in real time for people to take decisions at the port immediately. And I think the fact that you're bringing the edge compute through cloud technologies with multiple cloud players will support that activity a lot, right? I would think between connecting data and analyzing data and then deciding what to do with it, that's been a problem statement for 4G, which is going to back office and post-event analysis leading to corrections for future possibilities. Whereas this is going to be near real time. I think a port which is looking at multiple companies at the port, which may have different systems to do their activities, but a single platform that then can bring it all together for a port authority to manage such transactions and movement of goods, security, ad hoc, accidents. And
even like security cameras, etc. Right?
That's right.
All being processed locally. You don't really even have to send them, data out, and that helps in terms of real-time, decision making.
Yeah, I agree. And this is an interesting example. What do you think about industry, factory environment?
Oh, certainly, right? Industry is, I would say, one of the largest beneficiaries of 5G, because when you look at industries, especially when you talk about Industry 4.0, but automation is the buzzword, right? And when you talk about automation, then it almost always has to be combined with lower downtime, right? And because there's not a human interface there, lower downtime really has to now be immediately acted upon. So when you talk about sensors, when you talk about an ability to immediately offload data into the local environment in a factory, make decisions based on that, there is no immediate human interaction. So the entire process from supply chain coming in to unloading the supplies to actually getting it onto the factory floor that can be automated, and then creating whatever factory process it is to create the end user and good, and then shipping it, all that is right now can be done almost seamlessly with the ability of enabling 5G technology, because the applications that a company such as yours provides and the network that we provide together can combine to provide the seamless factory environment, which was very hard to do earlier, just to be fair. I mean, you could automate portions of it, but to automate almost an entire factory wasn't possible. So I think this is really where we have to take the next.
That's interesting. I think we all have heard about this use case. It's not something new that we're talking about. And yet, the way we explained it, I think it touches a lot more of those pieces that are end-to-end life cycle of factory management.
Sure.
And as you know, our clients, have multiple software, a workforce. There is an activity set from one and the other for everything. Supply chain is a different set of activity. Manufacturing has multiple assemblies, quality management, quality control. So many factors, so many places that you have to decide real time will make a big difference to, a defective piece, an unsafe environment situation. All of those things will start to seem to, from what you're just saying, become real for people to manage factories.
Sure.
Right? So that's an interesting deployment. What else do you think are areas that we should look at? What is on your radar?
Well, the final one, there's a couple of areas. Obviously, ARVR you touched upon. I do believe that's going to be a total explosion of ARVR activities going forward, because you're right, it has joined the mainstream, and it will soon become almost imperative for us to do some learning using ARVR. The advantage of using 5G for ARVR is, the low latency part of it, right? As soon as you get a low latency, you don't have to wait for any responses from yourself on the ARVR set. And then that helps from a user experience perspective. That's number one.
Right.
Number two, connected devices. Connected devices are you will see an explosion of that, whether it's automotive or it could be as little as your fridge, right? So there's all kinds in between, of connected devices that are going to be exploding through an ecosystem. And all of them will have data exploding through them as well. So that's another part that we have to think about as to what are we going to do with all this data? What actions do enterprises or even consumers take as a result of this data? And can that be automated as well? So again, there's a ton of these that are going forward. Healthcare, totally there, right? Whether we're talking about remote patient monitoring, telemedicine, or surgery even, right? All these are enhanced using 5G. So there is certainly a very good rationale for embracing this across a multitude of industries, and I think us joining forces is actually a great thing to do.
Yeah, I would say I'll take one thought process that an experience in the IoT version in 4G scenario, devices, you need them, sensors as you call them, analytics to sit behind it, so some place to load the data and and compute and analyze the data, and then essentially then projecting the insights of the data so people take decisions. Right? And I remember a use case of fresh food from field, farm to fork, and as the goods move through the farm to the fleet, onto a warehouse, into a retail store, it changes many hands.
Sure.
And I remember in those days, it was looking at a few sensors which could travel across the world and still carry data on it. And it was an expensive affair. And then there were other factors of whose fault is it. But let's park that for a moment. But what you're just saying to me is, instead of looking at, from a telecom standpoint, you're not just thinking of offering 5G platform. You're building it in such a way that the data that comes from these sensors gets onto a cloud environment, is available as a platform for people to then only use applications on top of the data to analyze their specific data. In the past, it used to be a sensor which has its own analytics, its own data, and another sensor for temperature, another sensor for something else. And who was going to put it all together?
Sure.
Used to be a system integrator.
Right.
In this case, I think what you're saying is you're going beyond just providing connectivity, also providing edge access to people and a platform on which system integrators or enterprises can build applications specific to that industry. Is that what I'm hearing?
Sure. Actually, what we're trying to create is an ecosystem, right, of large cloud players, certainly very important integrators such as yourself, who have the capability and the application knowledge and the savvy to create custom applications or even off-the-shelf applications, but are customized to individual client requirements. And then we provide the foundational underlying network infrastructure. So when you combine these three forces together, it's really a win-win, and I would say 4 wins versus 3, because it creates a user experience which is completely seamless. They don't have to go look for multiple areas. They have a single person, to talk to. And then they have all the necessities for them to operate in a much more seamless fashion than they were earlier. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Versus waiting days or maybe sometimes even weeks for the analytics to actually occur, this can be done instantaneously. And then what happens as a result of that is decisions then can be taken instantaneously. It could be as simple as moving a workload from X to Z, or it could be as important as saying, stop the process immediately because that's creating a fire. Right? So there's all kinds of in-between decisions that are enabled as a result of, frankly, somebody as important as you creating this ecosystem and us being a part of that along with the cloud providers, of course.
Fantastic. I mean, we all thinking together, and yet we are selling independently.
Sure.
And I think it's about time we start to think about I think we both understand each of our values. The question then is, do we understand enough about your technology? And do you understand enough about our vertical experiences that we can offer a value to the enterprise customer that they can appreciate? I think one of those things has to get done. I mean, I'm also thinking that everybody can do everything on their own and buy bits and pieces from different technology segments and bring it all together, which is, I would believe, one of the slowdowns of the markets of 5G adoption. What are your thoughts on how do we do this together?
So the key actually is the word integration, right? If you look at the word, because you're right, clients can go pick multiple parts themselves and put it together. And some of them surely will do that because they have in-house expertise. But a vast majority of them would prefer somebody who's come in with a partner who has the foundational experience. So, if you go to a client and say, I have a partner who has a network expertise who has deployed 5G ubiquitously, has experience doing private 5G wireless, has experience doing telemedicine, has experience doing connected cars, and you have the experience of all the applications, services that you provide as a company, along with the integration services, to the cloud services as well. And you bring in the cloud services provider as a partner as well. That creates an ecosystem which is extremely powerful, right? And without it, I'm not sure enterprises will actually be able to do what we can do together. I honestly believe in, that this is the era of integration between key partners to such an extent because the complexity of the problems that we are solving is much greater than what we were doing earlier, right? We are trying to solve real-time problems. We are trying to solve security problems. We are trying to solve automation problems. And we're also at the same time dealing with the data explosion and the analytics behind it. So when you start putting all these things together, I can't think of a better way to go to market than with a partner like you.
Fantastic. Andrea, we're taking all the questions on ourselves as a chat.
That's okay.
Yeah. But, I would say, from what we're discussing today, clearly 5G is more real than it ever was. And when I say 5G, I also mean edge as well as IoT.
Sure.
Right? And from what I'm hearing from you, AT&T, you're bullish about the fact that this is no longer an early adoption situation. The adoptions have happened in exponential growth is expected, and exponential curves always look like flat till it starts to explode. Right. And from our standpoint, I think we believe that the process of testing, deploying, evaluating will still happen at enterprise levels, because they're not just testing whether a new business model can work, they're also testing whether their current systems and structure and their people and process can take that kind of scale.
Sure.
So between the two, I think we are looking at a period next year or two where together, as we go and meet them in the market, we'll start to hear some of those things as well.
Sure. And you hit the nail here, because I do believe that we are going to see the hockey stick here, right? We've been on the flat side of the hockey stick, and the curve is now beginning to turn. And as soon as we hit this turn, which will be this year, I do think there's a hockey stick effect, and we'll go right up there. So this is a great time for us to be together.
Great.